Welcome to your course in HMI Design Basics. This chapter describes the course's overall learning objectives and the main focus of each individual chapter. During this course, you'll acquire basic knowledge of visual and functional design that you can then apply to designing optimal user interfaces. The goal of this course is to introduce you to the fundamentals of design and, together with you, explore in more detail the requirements for a well-designed user interface. You'll learn more about Gestalt principles of design, criteria, and orientation guidelines that you can already use the next time you develop a user interface. Learn practical tools in the individual course chapters. Let's get started. Chapter A introduces the fundamentals of design and defines important design aspects you'll need to keep in mind. Chapter B builds on your newly acquired knowledge and focuses on the design laws and rules you'll need to consider for a good design. Chapter C provides an overview of the DIN EN ISO 9241 standard, which provides standard guidelines for designing user interfaces in engineering. Chapter D, the last chapter, brings together the course's key components and derives requirements for designing a user interface. Here, you'll learn how to navigate within the course and who will be serving as your moderator throughout all the chapters. This is a list of buttons used in the course. These buttons allow you to flexibly navigate this training chapter. This is Ingo, the engineer. He'll serve as your guide throughout all the chapters. For your optimal training in the topic area, we recommend you work through all the chapters to systematically build up your knowledge. Now Ingo will introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Ingo the engineer. Together, we'll examine various design fundamentals. To do this, I'll show you useful tools from my toolbox that you can then use to design an optimal user interface. To deepen the individual educational content, you'll complete practical exercises with me so that we can immediately apply your newly acquired knowledge. I look forward to working with you and hope you have fun working on the individual chapters.
This is Ingo, the engineer. He'll serve as your guide throughout all the chapters. For your optimal training in the The focus of today's chapter, Why is Design So Important?, is to define benchmarks for the benefits and added value of good, functional design and derive important criteria for the practical design of user interfaces.
In this chapter, you'll learn the definition of design and which aspects play a role in good functional design. Find out what practical added values this creates for a good user interface design. Let's get started.
Let's start with the fundamentals of design. Design encompasses the proper and functional composition of a product and includes a number of aspects that go beyond the purely visual shape and color of an object. Design also incorporates the function and imagery of an object, as well as its interaction with users. Design influences an object's intuitive, effective, and efficient use. It can help you save money, gain a competitive edge, and achieve recognition value. Many people associate design with appearance, such as the color and shape of objects. But design is much more than just visual. In addition to appearance, functional design plays an important role in the development of user interfaces and websites. For example, the layout of navigation bars and menus, user management, or even a modular conceptualization of plant sections. Design plays a central role in a product's market success. A good design creates added value and benefits. But how? To understand that, it's important to consider the following. What does it mean for a product to be successful? What effect does a product have on users and consumers? And which design aspects should be considered? A product's market success is affected by the ongoing transformation of our society. Whereas price, range of functions, service life, and reliability used to be the relevant factors, now user-friendliness, flexibility, and customizability also contribute to making a product attractive to users and selling it to the intended target group. Let's take the example of a television set. When the first color TV came on the market in the 1960s, the high purchase price made it necessary to focus mainly on color images and the device's long service life. Today, in the age of the smart TV, a television set's flexible use is extremely important. It can be used as a standard TV set and a PC monitor, but also as an intelligent monitor for a tablet or smartphone. Thanks to the customized installation of apps, users can configure and operate their device however they want. The smart TV's modern flat design makes it easy to integrate into the home environment. So design operates on various levels. A basic distinction is made between three specific levels: user, observer, and owner. To illustrate this concept, let's look at three examples from everyday life. Example 1. The user level. The user level mainly refers to a product's functionality. When Ingo comes home from work in the evening, he likes to sit on the couch and watch TV. But which button should Ingo push to turn on the TV? Look at the remote in Ingo's hand. Which button would you use to turn the TV on and off? Most remotes have a red button in the upper left-hand corner. By color, position, and his own past experience, Ingo identifies the power button and can intuitively use it immediately. In other words, good design requires you to know the users and their experiences, preferences, as well as needs, and take these into account when developing the product. Example 2. The visual observer level. Mainly, the observer level includes a product's aesthetics and visual appearance. Let's accompany Ingo to the supermarket. He's standing in front of shelves containing both low-fat and organic products. Which products are low-fat and which are organic? Low-fat products are usually identified by blue stripes, and organic products generally have a green layout. The observer associates the color blue with low-fat and the green color with natural and organic. This means the right aesthetics and visual appearance are important for being able to quickly recognize and distinguish among objects. A conscious choice of color will unconsciously guide users. Example 3. The owner level. Above all, the owner level involves the feelings and imagery associated with a product. Ingo is on his way from the office to the factory floor. Suddenly, he sees a sign on the door with a man, a woman, and a person in a wheelchair. What could this symbol mean? Obviously, these are the symbols often used to identify restrooms. So, Ingo identifies these signs as restroom indicators. Use of the correct symbolism is vital for effective operation, as well as the user's peace of mind during operation. Thanks to these well-known symbols, it's easier for Ingo to recognize information. He intuitively knows about specific features without having to consciously think about them. So what about the design of human-machine interfaces, or HMIs? Why does good design play an essential role? What added value and benefits result from good design? In order to understand what added value and benefits are created, you first have to consider certain basic aspects. Design aspects from the user's perspective, design aspects from the company's perspective, and design as a process. Click the icons to learn more about these design aspects. For users, the most important thing is simple and intuitive operation of the HMI. They want to perform their tasks quickly and without encountering obstacles. It's also important that operating procedures be effectively and efficiently designed. This is achieved by guiding users through difficult operating procedures. The user interface has to provide support. Another aspect is the selective display of information tailored to the current task. In addition, using the product should be an experience for users. For users, the most important So what about the design of human-machine interfaces, or HMIs? Why does good design play an essential role? What added value and benefits result from good design? In order to understand what added value and benefits are created, you first have to consider certain basic aspects. Design aspects Today's chapter focuses on the influencing factors and design laws from Gestalt psychology as they apply to designing a user-friendly interface.
In this chapter, you'll learn the importance of Gestalt psychology for designing functional user interfaces. You'll discover which design laws are effective and which influencing factors have to be taken into account for optimal information processing. Let's get started.
This chapter focuses on design laws and influencing factors that originated in Gestalt psychology. These principles and factors provide us with important clues on how to design a user interface that is easy to use and transparent for users. But what exactly is Gestalt psychology? Gestalt psychology is primarily a theory of perception developed between the 1920s and the 1940s. It includes various research areas, such as the way in which complex scenarios and stimuli are perceived by users. The results of studies in this area indicate regularities that are now basic to the design of user interfaces, systems, products, and websites. So, when is a layout attractively designed? And when do we find it useful? We'll find out in this chapter through some examples and application exercises. Take a look over Ingo's shoulder to see the different design laws you can already use for your next user interface.
Before we move on to summarizing the most important design laws and influencing factors, take a moment to apply and reflect on the new information. Tip: when answering the questions, consider the reasons behind your answers. Let's test your newly acquired knowledge. Design laws and influencing factors from Gestalt psychology play an important role in the display of information in terms of grouping the information and quickly communicating it to users. When objects are close together, they're perceived as belonging together. Empty spaces communicate a separation of content. Objects with a similar shape, color, texture, size, or brightness are perceived as belonging together, even if they're spaced further apart. This law is often applied in combination with other design laws. Things that have a closed contour, or objects within a frame, are perceived as a unit. The contour or frame doesn't necessarily have to be closed. The shape is completed by the viewer's subjective perception. Objects placed in a continuous or implied line or curve are perceived as a group. The line or curve doesn't have to be completely visible. It can be implied or even dotted. Chunking refers to a technique that divides large units of information into many small units, making them much easier for the user to remember. The number of units is not important. In the course of various studies, Hick found that people have a hard time making decisions if they have a large number of options. To make user interface or operation effective and efficient, it's important to display only the information necessary for the particular operation or plant view. The options should be selected in advance and kept to a bare minimum according to the less is more principle. When displaying information, make sure items that belong together appear to be a continuation of a sequence. Law of good continuation. And objects of the same type. Law of good shape. Or with similar properties. Law of common fate and law of synchrony. Are perceived as belonging together. The perception of shapes, objects, icons is always subjective and tends toward a logical result. If there is too much room for interpretation, the decision takes longer and can lead to differences in interpretation. Therefore, make sure design shapes, objects, icons are simple and abstract. Law of simplicity. Thank you for your participation. Now let's summarize the most important key points of the chapter on my notepad. Taking the laws and their interaction into account is critical for good design. When displaying information, pay special attention to the laws of proximity, similarity, symmetry, and common fate. Besides the design laws, other influencing factors include the golden ratio, color, Hick's law, and chunking. Use well-known shapes and icons. Offer users only a limited number of alternatives. This enables them to make faster choices. Less is more. Divide large units of information into smaller units. This makes it easier for users to remember them. Finally, applying design laws and influencing factors is the key to success when developing a well-designed HMI user interface. Congratulations! You've successfully completed the chapter on design laws and influencing factors. I hope you'll enjoy applying your new knowledge. If you want to continue with this course, select the next chapter.
Today's chapter focuses on the standard DIN EN ISO 9241. It provides you with important design guidelines and information on the usability of a user interface, while taking into account the specific context of use.
In this chapter, you'll learn the definition of the standard DIN EN ISO 9241 and find out more about its most important components that provide guidelines for practical design. Additionally, you'll learn more about the goal of high usability from the standard DIN EN ISO 9241-11 and what relevance an analysis has for the user-friendly design of a user interface. Let's get started.
This chapter is about the standard DIN EN ISO 9241, which describes guidelines for optimal human-system interaction. It provides you with important basics for designing user interfaces in engineering. Here you'll find excerpts of the most important elements. Let's discover what the standard acronym stands for and what lies behind the meaning. Originally, the standard DIN EN ISO 9241 described requirements and guidelines for designing working environments and specifically the hardware and software that supported everyday office work. That's why its original title was Ergonomic Requirements of Office Work with Visual Display Terminals. However, the focus of the standard changed in 2006. The standard had to be expanded to meet the growing requirements placed on systems and products. It was no longer limited to everyday office work. The new and current name of the standard is Ergonomics of Human-System Interaction. The abbreviation ISO 9241 refers to the standard's international orientation, while EN indicates that it's a European standard. DIN signifies this standard is listed by the German Committee for Standardization and is also the standard for Germany. So what exactly is the DIN EN ISO 9241 standard? Altogether, it comprises a total of 35 parts. To describe them all would, of course, be beyond the scope of this chapter. For this reason, we'll start by telling you more about the original, basic parts that represent the core of the standard and haven't been affected by various modernizations. The functional orientation of design and the guidelines associated with it are continuing to evolve, as is society. So, it's all the more important that you be familiar with these core guidelines. Based on this, we'll concentrate on the components of the current standard that are especially important for the development of user interfaces in engineering. As an introduction to the fundamentals that are still valid today, let's trace the chronological timeline of the DIN EN ISO 9241 standard's development. You'll now learn the essential parts of the original standard catalog, which at that time only had 17 parts. The parts of the standard still valid today are guidance on task requirements, workstation layout and postural requirements, guidance on the work environment, terms and concepts that define the principle of usability, user guidance, menu dialogues, command dialogues, direct manipulation dialogues. The remaining parts of the original standard have either been updated over time or were supplemented or replaced by new parts, and include dialogue principles, principles and guidance on visual presentation of information, forms. Today, These parts represent the foundation of the standard and determine fundamental guidelines for designing user interfaces. Let's focus on the parts most important for developing user interfaces in engineering. Part 11. Usability. Part 13. User guidance. Part 14. Menu dialogues. Part 110. Dialogue principles. Part 112. Principles for the presentation of information. Part 125. Guidance on visual presentation of information. Part 143. Forms, plus one additional part. Part 210, which formulates guidelines for the process of designing usable interactive systems and has replaced the ISO 13407 international standard. Users essentially judge a system, product, or service by its usability. The basis for evaluating usability is the previously mentioned Part 11 of the standard DIN EN ISO 9241, which is also known as DIN EN ISO 9241-11. Let's take a closer look at this part. According to this part of the standard, usability is the extent to which a system, product, or service can be used by specific users to achieve specified goals with effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction in a specified context of use. Let's think about the pain points of a routine workday when a user interface isn't optimally designed. Instead of being satisfied, the user is frustrated. This is the case, for example, when error messages require frequent acknowledgement, deep navigation levels predominate, or feedback for users is imprecise. So what are the benefits when a user interface is designed according to the principles, guidelines, and rules we've learned? Let's find out. To optimally design a user-friendly interface, you first need to know the context in which it will be used. The motto, "The bait has to appeal to the fish, not to the fisherman," applies here. To ensure your customers like working with your user interface, you need to think about the following contexts of use: user, work context, equipment, and work environment. Let's examine these one by one as they relate to Ingo. As you've just heard, the most important context is the customer, meaning the end user or interface user. Their individual knowledge, specific skills, and personal characteristics, for example, their preferences when using an interface, represent the starting point and therefore the main criterion for your design. In other words, they form the start and end point of your criteria-based deliberations. That's why it's important you deduce the user's requirements and understand their overall work context. The particular work context is determined by the user's specific area of application, which comprises a specific field of activity and specific daily operations. The way in which users interact with the user interface in their daily professional routine is a relevant influencing factor for your design. Each user also works with special equipment, such as gloves in the food and beverage industry, or styluses subject to specification and used in a particular area of application. Additionally, the interaction between this equipment and the functioning of the user interface is of central importance for users in their daily work, thus determining the optimal design. Finally, the overall work environment in which the user interface is used is critical. This includes organizational or technical sequences of operations, as well as the purely physical conditions of the work environment. such as dirty fingers that have become sticky during food production.
Before we move on to summarizing the most important elements of this chapter, overview of the standard DIN EN ISO 9241, let's take a moment to apply and reflect on the new information. Tip: when answering the questions, consider the reasons behind your answers. To achieve a good design, you need to apply guidelines from the current standard, as well as take into account context of use to guarantee high usability. Let's test your newly acquired knowledge. The standard DIN EN ISO 9241 was expanded in 2006, and its title changed to Ergonomics of Human-System Interaction. DIN EN ISO 9241 contains multiple parts with various guidelines for designing human-system interaction. Usability means the extent to which a system can be used by specified users to achieve specified goals with effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction in a specified context of use. The result of low usability is users are unwilling or unable to operate a system or product properly. On the other hand, the result of high usability is operation becomes an experience for the user, which makes operating sequences more effective. The context of use plays a decisive role in determining usability. To determine the context of use, it's important to know the type of user as well as their skills, knowledge, personal characteristics, and tasks. In addition to user type, the equipment and work environment affect the design of an HMI user interface. If the context of use is known, the system can be optimally tailored to the user. This improves productivity and saves money. Thank you for your participation. Now let's summarize the most important key points of the chapter on my notepad. The standard DIN EN ISO 9241 is entitled Ergonomics of Human System Interaction. DIN EN ISO 9241 provides important guidelines and principles for developing good HMI user interfaces. Important parts that relate to the development of HMI user interfaces are DIN EN ISO 9241-11, 13, 14, 110, 112, 125, 143, and 210. Usability and context of use play an important role in a good design. In conclusion, please note, if you observe the essential guidelines and principles of DIN EN ISO 9241 and take usability into account, your users will be satisfied instead of frustrated. Congratulations! You successfully completed the chapter. Overview of the standard DIN EN ISO 9241. I hope you'll enjoy applying your new knowledge. If you want to continue with this course, select the next chapter.
Today's chapter focuses on user interface requirements in engineering that guarantee optimal user guidance in practice.
Building on the core aspects of the previous chapters, you'll now learn more about the 3 essential requirements for a good functional design. These requirements are extremely important, given users have different areas of application and systems are constantly evolving. These aspects relate to the targeted display of information, optimal operation and user guidance, and of course, the context of engineering itself, which must be given special attention during development. Let's get started.
Let's start by taking a look at the basic requirements for designing a user interface. In this chapter, as in the ones before it, it's a matter of taking different perspectives into account for designing the optimal user interface and basing your decisions on the fundamental principles you learned in previous chapters, including the design aspects, design as a process, the company's perspective, and the user's perspective from the chapter on why is design so important. The key factors from the chapter on design laws and influencing factors. The guidelines and principles from the standard DIN EN ISO 9241, which ensures all design components are adapted to the specific situation and user requirements. When we now look at the specific requirements for user interface in engineering, 3 areas come into focus: display of information, operation and user guidance, and the specific context of engineering itself. An optimal functional design depends on a holistic view of the particular user context. Good design is based on the display of information. But what does it take to achieve a targeted and user-friendly display of information? Let's take a closer look at our examples from Chapter A. When displaying information, you need to make sure that it can be quickly apprehended, that it's limited to a few unambiguous items, is distinguishable in terms of display and form, is limited to the essential, meaning users see only the information they currently need, is recognizable, meaning the same type of information is displayed in an identical way, stands out, meaning the user's eyes go immediately to the information, is highly legible, is easy to understand, meaning it needs no interpretation, and last but not least, is attractively presented, meaning using harmonious colors, shapes, objects, and structures, and taking into account contrasts and red-green deficiencies. Usability, also called user-friendliness and user guidance, is essential for designing the optimal user interface. Let's take a look at an example of an everyday purchase. To achieve user-friendliness and user guidance, a user interface needs to work quickly. Operating procedures shouldn't be prolonged. Be intuitive. Operation has to be self-explanatory, and the possibility of operator errors eliminated as far as possible. Be clearly organized. The information displayed has to match the operating situation. Provide feedback. Users should receive prompt and perceptible feedback on operation and plant status. Be secure and protected against unauthorized access, meaning functions are protected through adequate user management. Usability, also called user-friendliness and user guidance, is essential for designing the optimal user interface. Let's take a look at an example of an everyday purchase. To achieve user-friendliness and user guidance, a user interface needs to work quickly. Operating procedures shouldn't be prolonged. Be intuitive. Operation has to be self-explanatory, and the possibility of operator errors eliminated as far as possible. Be clearly organized. The information displayed has to match the operating situation. Provide feedback. Users should receive prompt and perceptible feedback on operation and plant status. Be secure and protected against unauthorized access, meaning functions are protected through adequate user management. Usability, also called user-friendliness and user guidance, is essential for designing the optimal user interface. Let's take a look at an example of an everyday purchase. To achieve user-friendliness and user guidance, a user interface needs to work quickly. Operating procedures shouldn't be prolonged. Be intuitive. Operation has to. Now let's focus on engineering as the area of application and consider a product's intended purpose. Which components are key to maximum user-friendliness when manufacturing a product? And how can we apply these aspects to user interface design? 3 components are especially important. The first component is planning and finance. If you choose a modular structure and a global style definition for your design, you'll be able to stay within your budget as elements can be reused for other projects. The second component is standardization and expandability. Simple software conversions enable you to both update your product and flexibly adapt it to different hardware, such as different display sizes. Its transferability is guaranteed. The last component is user orientation. Self-explanatory imagery and standardized, neutral language make a product easily adaptable to individual customer requirements. The product can be used flexibly and independently of national language.
Let's take a moment to review and reflect on what you've learned. Tip: when answering the questions, consider the reasons behind your answers. To achieve a good functional design, you need to know the requirements for information display, operation, and user guidance, as well as engineering. Let's test your newly acquired knowledge. When displaying information, make sure that only the information currently needed is displayed, and its display is attractive and distinguishable. Take advantage of color, shape, objects, structures, and suitable fonts to improve legibility. When displaying information, make sure that only the information currently The requirements for operation and user guidance are multifaceted. Be sure to display the operating processes appropriately. Don't prolong the user unnecessarily. Make the process intuitive. Prevent wrong inputs and provide support in the event of an error. Supply only the amount of information necessary for the current operation. Critical functions should be secure and protected against unauthorized access by means of user management. For engineering, it's important to stay within your budget and reuse existing elements to prevent a multiplication of projects. This saves time and money in terms of both engineering and project administration. You also need to make sure projects are as language independent as possible and take into account country-specific characteristics and commonly used imagery. This makes project engineering accessible to a larger user group. For engineering, it's important. Thank you for your participation. Now let's summarize the most important key points of the chapter on my notepad. Display information so that it is distinguishable, recognizable, stands out, and is highly legible and attractive. Limit your display to what is essential and necessary. Design user guidance in a way that is user-friendly, intuitive, and straightforward. Prevent incorrect inputs and offer support in the event of an error. Protect critical functions through suitable user management. When developing user interfaces, pay attention to modularity, reusability, language independence, imagery, and regional factors. Focus on the requirements of your HMI user interface and keep in mind the resulting key elements in order to implement a good visual and functional design. Congratulations! You've successfully completed the chapter on requirements for user interfaces. I hope you'll enjoy applying your new knowledge.